Welcome to Whispers in Deadlight. This channel is dedicated to all things horror, creepy, and scary. Prepare yourself for stories that'll chill your spine and mysteries that defy reason. Sit back, listen closely, and let the whispers guide you into the unknown. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more chilling tales. It was a crisp October evening when the idea took root in the back of our minds, like a slow-growing tumor. Cameron, Logan, and I were sitting in the quiet of my bedroom, the faint hum of the air conditioning the only sound between us. Cameron had just finished telling us about his father's most recent ghost hunting excursion. The seasoned investigator had spent hours in some abandoned church on the outskirts of town, fiddling with his EMF meters and spirit boxes, trying to coax some unholy presence into revealing itself. "I swear, you guys are missing out," Cameron had said, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "My dad finds the weirdest shit. I mean, ghosts, poltergeists, you name it." I wasn't exactly a believer. Sure, I'd heard the stories that floated around the small town like dust in the wind. But they were just that, stories. Nothing I'd ever seen had convinced me there was more to this world than what my eyes could see and my hands could touch. "Why don't you ever take us along?" Logan had asked, his voice tinged with that mix of curiosity and excitement that was becoming his signature. "I've always wanted to try it." Cameron hesitated for a moment. "Well, you guys aren't exactly ready for that kind of thing. My dad says the spirits out there, they don't play nice. Some of the stuff we've found? It's not just ghosts, it's something darker." Logan raised an eyebrow. "Darker? You mean, like demons?" "Not demons," Cameron had said, a far-off look in his eyes. "Something older. Something different." I felt a chill, not from the room's temperature, but from the way his voice had dropped to a whisper. That's when the idea hit. Maybe it was the bourbon Logan had snuck from his parents' cabinet, or maybe it was just the reckless energy of youth, but the plan was formed that night. "We'll do it," I said, my voice a mix of defiance and hesitation. "We'll go ghost hunting." And that was it. The wheels were in motion. No going back now. It was midnight when we finally arrived at the abandoned school. The place was just as eerie as the rumors had suggested, with ivy creeping up the walls and windows that were long shattered, gaping like empty eyes. The air around the building seemed to press in on us, thick and suffocating, as if the very atmosphere was holding its breath in anticipation. The school had been closed for decades. The local legends had painted a picture of the place as cursed, a haunted relic of the past, where a child had been murdered by a homeless man in a horrific act of violence. After the murder, the school was abandoned, its walls soaked with sorrow and blood. No one had dared enter since. Except for us. "We should have brought more flashlights," Logan muttered as we made our way through the dark, the beams of our torches slicing through the blackness like thin knives. "I can't see shit." Cameron grinned, his teeth reflecting in the dim light. "That's the fun part. No one ever said ghost hunting was easy." As we stood at the entrance, the full weight of what we were about to do hit me. The wind howled through the broken windows, and the sound of it carried a strange, almost human-like wail. It made my stomach twist, but I pushed the fear down. We weren't backing out now. Inside, the air was stagnant, stale, like it hadn't moved in years. The floors creaked under our feet, echoing through the empty hallways like whispers from long-dead souls. Every step seemed to reverberate in the silence, each creak of the floorboards another reminder that we were not alone. "We should start in room 31, Cameron said, his voice low. "My dad said it's always the worst in that room." The room was cold, unnaturally so, as if the temperature dropped the second we stepped inside. Dust clung to the air, particles swirling like ghosts caught in a dance. In the center of the room was a desk, aged and worn, its surface scarred by time and neglect. On top of the desk, Cameron carefully set down a small wooden box. It creaked open with a disturbing groan, revealing the Ouija board nestled inside. I had heard of these boards before, of course. Heard the stories of people who claimed to have contacted spirits, demons, and otherworldly entities through them. but I never thought I'd actually use one. Until now. Are you sure about this? Logan asked, his voice tight with nervous excitement. I mean, what if it actually works? Cameron shrugged, his face serious. It's the only way to talk to them. Trust me, this is how it's done. We gathered around the desk, our fingers trembling as we placed them lightly on the planchette. I tried to ignore the sick feeling in my stomach, the one that told me this was a bad idea. But curiosity got the better of me. Cameron's fingers pressed down on the board first. Is anyone here with us? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. The air seemed to thicken, and for a moment, nothing happened. The planchette remained still, unmoving. And then, it shifted. We all stared at it, our eyes wide, as it began to slowly slide across the board, as if guided by some unseen force. It stopped at the letter H, then moved to E, and then L. Help! Logan whispered, his voice shaky. The planchette moved again, sliding quickly now, as though eager to get to the next letter. E, it spelled. L. And then it stopped. We all sat in stunned silence. Help. L. I don't get it, I said, my voice low. What does that mean? Before anyone could answer, there was a sudden crash from the hallway, a loud noise like something heavy falling. We jumped, our hearts racing. Cameron's face went pale. Did you hear that? He whispered, his voice thick with fear. We nodded, and without another word, we rushed to the door. As we stepped into the hallway, the shadows seemed to stretch and twist unnaturally. The beam of our flashlights flickered, casting long, distorted shapes along the cracked walls. My skin crawled, and the hair on the back of my neck stood on end. There was something watching us, something waiting. I spotted it first. A figure. A shadow. It was standing by the entrance of the school, just beyond the threshold of our lights, tall and dark. Its form was a blur, shifting like static on a TV screen. Guys, I whispered, my voice barely audible. Do you see that? Cameron squinted, his breath catching in his throat. I don't see anything. But Logan saw it too, his eyes wide with fear. It's moving. We backed away slowly, each step measured, as if trying not to disturb the air around us. The shadow remained where it was, watching, waiting. Then, without warning, it vanished. One moment, it was there, looming like a dark cloud, and the next, it was gone. Just gone. We stood in the hallway, frozen, not knowing what to say or do. We stumbled back into room 31, our minds racing, our hearts pounding in our chests. Cameron was shaking his head, his fingers clenching into fists. I don't know what the hell that was, but I don't think I like it. I walked over to the desk, trying to shake off the chill that had settled in my bones. That's when I saw them. 3 photographs. They were old, the kind that might have been taken decades ago, their edges yellowed with age. But what stood out the most were the XS. Big, angry, crude marks, slashing across the faces of the children in the photos. None of us had put them there. Who did this? I whispered, my throat dry. Cameron stepped forward, his face pale. We didn't do that. The board. It must be the board. The spirits, they're trying to show us something. But what were they trying to show us? The temperature in the room had dropped even further, and I could see my breath in the air, a pale mist swirling in front of my face. I grabbed the Ouija board, my fingers trembling as I moved it across the desk. Who's doing this? I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. The planchette moved slowly, but it didn't stop at a letter this time. It moved in sharp, deliberate circles, as if the spirit on the other side was struggling to communicate something urgent. The board gave one last violent push. And then, the word appeared. Run. Panic hit us all like a freight train. Logan grabbed the spirit box from the corner of the room, its dials and lights flickering like some demonic gadget. We turned it on, hoping to catch another communication from the other side. The static buzzed loudly at first, making our ears ring. Then, a voice cut through the white noise. "Run." It was the same voice. Deep, raspy, almost pleading. "Run, run, run," the voice repeated, echoing in the space around us. We stared at each other, paralyzed by fear. Then, the air shifted. Something felt wrong, dangerously wrong. The room seemed to close in on us. The lights flickered again, and the air became suffocatingly heavy. My heart thudded in my chest as we rushed toward room 30, where the EMF detectors were set up. The second we entered the room, the detectors went wild. The needle on the device spiked violently, bouncing back and forth in a pattern that could only mean one thing. Something was here. Something close. My breath caught in my throat as the temperature in the room plummeted. A voice, deep and guttural, whispered through the air. "Leave. Now." Terrified, we bolted out of the room, our footsteps echoing in the hall. As we rushed back to room 31, I felt the weight of something behind me, something large and ominous, but I couldn't bring myself to look. When we reached the room, Logan's voice cracked as he whispered, "We're leaving. Now." But it was too late. The Ouija board was out of its box again, and the photographs were still there, now with even more marks on them. And then we saw him. The tall, shadowy figure. His form was now fully tangible, solid, towering above us. His face was obscured in darkness, but his eyes were like black holes. He reached for us, his hands outstretched. We ran, stumbling over our own feet, desperate to escape the nightmare that had unfolded around us. The school seemed to stretch on forever, the walls closing in, the door never closer. We broke through the exit, gasping for air, but the shadows followed us, lingering just outside the reach of the flashlight. We never returned to that school. But we couldn't forget what happened that night. And neither could they. The spirits, the shadows, the warning. They followed us home. And they still whisper in the dark. The journey had felt longer than it should have. Maybe it was the weight of the decision or the haunting stillness of the road ahead. Liam and Maya had never been fond of the quiet, at least not the kind of quiet that felt heavy, as if it carried something sinister. Maya had been relentless about the house on Hemlock Lane. "It's perfect, Liam. It's just what we need," she had insisted. But something about the house, even from the photos, unsettled Liam. The house, a grand old Victorian, seemed to loom in those pictures, its faded glory mocking any attempts to make it seem charming. But Maya had seen potential. And when Maya saw potential, it was hard to say no. So, they drove, miles, hours, across strange lands, pushing toward a decision that Liam was beginning to regret. The trees lining Hemlock Lane had begun to close in as they neared the property. It was as though they were being swallowed by the forest. The sunlight diminished, fading into a gray haze, until all that remained was an unnatural gloom. Even Maya, whose excitement had been palpable, fell silent. Liam's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "You okay?" he asked, his voice tinged with something else, something closer to dread than concern. Maya turned, her bright smile faltering under the weight of the silence. "Just excited," she said, but Liam could tell it wasn't just excitement. She was nervous too. "Yeah," he replied, but his stomach churned. The road felt endless, a winding serpent leading them into the mouth of a house that seemed to breathe in anticipation. The first sight of the house was like a punch to the gut. It stood in front of them, an imposing silhouette against the ashen sky. The grand porch, once majestic, was now slumped in neglect. The windows were dark, some boarded up, others cracked. Weeds had taken over the yard, and the once vibrant garden was nothing more than a tangle of thorns and overgrown grass. Maya's breath caught in her throat. "Wow," she whispered, but it wasn't the awe-filled wow of someone who had found their dream home. It was the hollow wow of someone trying to convince themselves that what they were seeing wasn't terrifying. Liam parked the car, but the sound of gravel crunching under the tires seemed too loud, a sharp reminder of how eerily quiet everything else was. The wind whispered through the trees, but there was no other sound. Not a bird, not a squirrel, not even the distant hum of traffic. The door creaked when Liam opened it. The smell hit him first, a mix of mildew, decay, and something faintly metallic, as if the house had been forgotten and left to rot. "Are you sure about this?" Liam asked, more to himself than to Maya. "Let's just go inside," Maya urged, though her voice lacked its usual confidence. Inside, the house swallowed them whole. The air was thick, as if it had been sealed for years. Dust hung in the air like a veil, and the floors groaned under their weight. Every step they took seemed to echo through the empty house, as if the house itself were alive, watching. Night fell quickly. The house seemed to grow colder as darkness stretched across the rooms. Liam and Maya unpacked, but their movements were sluggish, unsure. Every creak of the house sent them glancing at one another, questioning the decision they had made. Liam tried to light a fire in the old fireplace, but the wood was damp, and the flames sputtered. Maya, standing in the doorway, stared out into the night. "There's something about this place," she said, her voice trembling. Liam frowned. "What do you mean?" "I don't know," she said. I feel like we're not alone." He walked over to her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's just the house," he said, but the words felt hollow even as he spoke them. The following morning, Maya was the first to rise. The sunlight streamed weakly through the boards on the windows. She went to the kitchen, hoping for a semblance of normalcy. Liam followed, his mind heavy with thoughts of the house. As he passed through the hallway, he froze. In the corner of his eye, he saw something, a shadow, darker than the rest of the hallway. It moved. His heart skipped a beat. He spun around, but the hallway was empty. Nothing but dust and old furniture. He was sure he had seen something. A shape, a figure that didn't belong. "Everything okay?" Maya's voice broke his trance. Liam turned to her. "Yeah, just nothing. I thought I saw something." "You're probably just tired," she said, trying to sound reassuring. "It's a big move." Later that day, as they explored the upstairs, they came across the first of the house's many unsettling features. In one of the bedrooms, a small, wooden rocking horse sat in the corner. It was worn, its paint chipped and faded. But what chilled Liam to the bone was the fact that it was rocking, ever so slightly, as though an invisible child had been playing with it. Maya stared at it for a moment. "Isn't that strange?" she whispered. Liam didn't answer. He couldn't take his eyes off the rocking horse. The house felt colder now, the air heavy with something unspoken. Then it happened. The rocking began to pick up speed. Slowly at first, but then faster and faster, the old wood groaning under the pressure. "That's not possible," Liam muttered, his breath coming out in shallow gasps. Suddenly, the rocking stopped. The house was still. And then, they heard it. A faint, childish whisper. "Want to play?" That night, Liam couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, the sheets twisted around his legs, his eyes wide open. Maya was asleep beside him, her breathing steady, but Liam could feel something. Something in the walls. There were voices. Faint, almost imperceptible, but there nonetheless. He tried to ignore them, telling himself it was the wind, the house settling. But the whispering grew louder, and then it shifted, almost as if the walls themselves were talking. "Play with me," the voices hissed, a chorus of childish giggles filling the air. Liam shot up in bed, his heart racing. "Maya!" he whispered urgently, shaking her awake. "Maya, wake up." She stirred, groggy. "What is it?" They're here." The voices. In the walls. The next morning, they searched the house, trying to find the source of the whispers. In one of the rooms at the far end of the hall, they found it. It was small, almost childlike in its simplicity. A bed, a dresser, and a few scattered toys. But it wasn't the room that caught their attention, it was the pictures on the wall. Old photographs of children. Some were smiling, but others had eyes that seemed too dark, too knowing. Maya froze in front of one. A young girl, her hair in braids, a faint smile on her lips. But something in her eyes, something unholy, seemed to pierce through the photo. "This is the room," Maya said, her voice barely audible. "I think this is where they came from." Liam didn't want to ask. He didn't want to know. As the days passed, strange occurrences became more frequent. The house was alive with noise, scraping sounds in the walls, whispers at night, shadows flitting across rooms when no one was there. Liam began to see things. Figures in the corners of rooms, shapes that moved just out of sight. Maya was no better. She had started speaking of seeing a little girl, always just out of view, always disappearing when she tried to look directly at her. "Maybe we should leave," Liam suggested one night. But Maya refused. "No," she said, her voice sharp. "I won't let this place win." One evening, they explored the basement. It was colder down there, the air thick with a dampness that made it hard to breathe. But what they found at the heart of the basement would haunt them forever. A small wooden door, hidden behind piles of old furniture. The door was locked, but something pulled them toward it, something dark and hungry. With a creak, the door opened. Inside was a room. Bare. Empty. But the walls were covered in scratches. Deep, frantic gouges in the wood. And in the center of the room, a single, bloody handprint. It was on the final night that the house came alive. The whispers were deafening now, filling every corner, every crevice. The air was thick with it, oppressive. Maya and Liam ran through the halls, but the house shifted around them. Hallways twisted, doors led to nowhere. The walls closed in. And then, the little girl appeared. Standing at the foot of the stairs, her eyes black and empty. "Play with me," she whispered again. They ran, but it was too late. The house had them now. Its grip was suffocating, and they couldn't escape. Maya screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the house. Liam turned, ready to fight, but all he saw was darkness. The last thing he heard was the sound of children's laughter. When the police arrived days later, the house was silent. No signs of struggle, no sign of where Liam and Maya had gone. The house on Hemlock Lane stood, empty and waiting for the next souls foolish enough to think they could tame it. And somewhere, deep within the walls, the voices waited too. It was the kind of summer morning that looked innocent on the outside, bright sunlight, cicadas in the trees, and the sleepy hum of suburban silence. But even before the first bag was packed, I felt it. A pulling. A sort of whisper under my skin that told me something was off. I had just finished 5th grade, and that meant one thing: freedom. Or at least, that's what most kids would say. For me, summer had always been a kind of blurry nothingness. My parents were too busy working or fighting or ignoring each other to plan family vacations. No Disney World. No road trips. Just me and the house, echoing with forgotten toys and late-night TV reruns. But that year, everything changed. Avery, my best friend since 2nd grade, the kind of girl who had a ponytail for every day of the week and whose smile always looked a little too perfect to be real, invited me to a sleepaway camp. 2 weeks, she said with a grin that bared braces. All girls. No parents. Just fun. Her voice sparkled like soda bubbles. She told me stories about bonfires, canoe races, friendship bracelets, and secret midnight snacks. But one thing she left out, the one thing none of them ever mentioned, was the lake. Even when she described swimming, she said things like cool water, giant floaties, and supervised by counselors with lifeguard certificates. Not once did she say how deep it was, or how old, or what might be resting in the silt just beneath the surface. But I said yes. Because I was 11. And I didn't know any better. A week later, we were packed into Avery's mom's dusty Ford Expedition, her mom chain-smoking menthols with the windows cracked as the wind turned the car into a sauna of heat and stale smoke. 2 hours from home. That's how far we drove. 2 hours to leave safety behind. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Camp Laurel Hollow sat in the middle of nowhere, just off a stretch of winding back road so narrow it felt like a path carved through green wilderness. Trees loomed high overhead, casting crooked shadows like bony fingers. The sign, "Welcome to Camp Laurel Hollow," was so faded it looked like something out of a forgotten black and white photo. A relic. The cabins were worse. Weathered wood, crooked screen doors, and names painted above them like tombstones. Ours was called Cedar Grove, though not a cedar tree stood nearby. My heart thumped like it knew something I didn't. Avery didn't seem to notice. She was too busy unpacking her floral duffel bag and bouncing on the bunk beds. Then the camp leader came in. Her name was Miss Arlene. She was tall and thin and looked like she'd once been a strict librarian in another life. Tight gray bun, bony fingers, eyes like little dark marbles. She smiled. But it was a paper-thin smile. "Girls, please remember, no wandering off. Lights out by 10. And never, ever go near the lake alone." The lake. That was the first time it was mentioned. But the way she said it made the hairs on my neck rise. Like it was a warning masked as a rule. She handed us schedules printed in faded ink. 7 a.m. wake-up call. 8 a.m. breakfast. 9 a.m. lake activities. 12 p.m. lunch. And so on. I stared at the word lake until the letters didn't make sense anymore. The next morning came too fast. The alarm buzzed like an angry hornet and dragged us from sleep. We dressed in the itchy matching shirts they gave us and walked in silence to the cafeteria. It was the kind of place that smelled like burned toast and old ketchup. The kind of place where your footsteps echoed too loudly. Avery and I sat next to a group of girls already deep in conversation. One of them, tall, red hair, freckled face, smirked at us and said, "You guys know about the lake, right?" I paused with my spoon halfway to my mouth. Avery rolled her eyes. The redhead continued anyway. "Girl drowned there. 23 years ago. Slit her wrists and walked right in. They never found her body." I blinked. "What?" "They say sometimes you can feel her, if you go out far enough. Like she's still down there, waiting." Avery elbowed me. "Don't listen to them. It's just a camp story." But my oatmeal went cold. And the redhead smiled like she knew something I didn't. After breakfast, we were marched in lines to the lake like lambs to the slaughter. It was beautiful in that eerie, untouched way. Still, dark water with a film of mist clinging to the surface. Dragonflies hovered like sentries. The dock creaked under our weight. "Come on!" Avery shouted, already in the water, splashing. I stood at the edge, heart pounding. Something about the water felt wrong. It wasn't just deep, it was ancient. Like it had secrets. The dock gave a little lurch beneath me. I turned. Nothing. Avery waved. "Jump already." I did. The water was warm. Too warm. Like bathwater that had sat out too long. We swam, played tag, dunked each other. The counselors laughed and clapped from the shore. Then I stepped on something. Hard. Solid. I looked down through the murk and saw it. A bone. A long, pale bone half buried in the sand. I screamed. The sound died in the thick air. I ran. Miss Arlene didn't ask many questions. She just looked at the lake with a face like stone and blew her whistle. Everyone out. They scrubbed us off at the showers like we'd been contaminated. Avery tried to distract me with arts and crafts, but my brain kept circling back. The bone. The girl. The water that felt too warm. And that night, just before lights out, I thought I heard something outside the cabin. A soft slosh. A wet dragging sound. But when I peeked through the window, the lake was still. Too still. That night I dreamt of the lake. But it wasn't the lake as it was in the day. No. This one was black, oily and endless, and I was underwater, suspended like a puppet. I couldn't scream. Something slithered just beyond my vision. A whisper crawled into my ears. "Stay." I woke up choking, gasping for air, my sheets damp and tangled. Avery was asleep in the bunk above me, breathing slow, oblivious. I could still feel it. The cold fingers on my ankle. But it had just been a dream, right? That's what I told myself, until I noticed the puddle near my bed. Small. Circular. Like someone had stood there, dripping. Breakfast tasted like cardboard the next morning. I sat staring into my cereal, watching the flakes sink and swirl, thinking of bones and whispers and puddles that shouldn't have been there. Then Katie, the redhead from before, sat across from me, tray in hand, smirking like the devil knew a secret. "I heard what happened yesterday," she said. I didn't answer. Katie leaned in. "They never tell you, do they? About Lily?" I looked up. "Lily." She grinned. "The girl who died. Slit her wrists with a mirror shard from cabin B. Then walked straight into the lake while everyone else was sleeping. They didn't even know she was gone until breakfast. That's why cabin B stays empty." Avery rolled her eyes beside me. "You really believe this crap?" Katie ignored her. "They say her spirit never left. She was angry, alone, forgotten. She pulls down anyone who reminds her of what she lost." She paused, eyes on me. "Maybe she thought you were her." I pushed away my tray and left. But not before Katie whispered, "The lake remembers." I went to the bathroom to clear my head. The old tile floor echoed beneath my sneakers. I turned on the faucet, splashed water on my face, and stared into the mirror. My reflection looked wrong. Pale. Eyes too wide. Lips trembling. Then a noise. Bang. A stall door slammed shut. I spun. No one. I crouched and looked under the doors. Nothing. Just shadows. But then I saw it. A single wet footprint, facing the wrong direction. Like someone had walked into the stall, but never came out. My chest tightened. I backed out slowly, eyes never leaving the stall. Something whispered behind the door. "Stay." I ran. Later that day we had canoe practice. I begged to skip, but Miss Arlene insisted. "You'll be fine," she said. "The lake is calm today." That was the problem. It was too calm. Like it was holding its breath. I was in one of the first canoes. The counselor pushed me off the dock, and I paddled slowly, my life jacket snug, eyes scanning the water. Then came the tug. A hard, violent pull from beneath. My canoe flipped. Water swallowed me. And then, a hand. It grabbed my leg. Cold. Strong. Desperate. It didn't want me to leave. I kicked, screamed, but the water muffled it all. Then another hand, clawing at my life jacket straps. And just when I thought I'd be dragged under for good, something snapped. The hand slipped, and I burst to the surface gasping. Miss Arlene dove in. She pulled me to shore. I was shaking. Hysterical. No one said a word. They took me to the camp counselor's office. It was a small cabin that smelled like pine and old paper. The woman's name was Ms. Bellamy, and she wore oversized glasses and a fake smile. I told her everything. The bone. The dream. The bathroom. The canoe. The hand. She nodded politely, writing something down. Then she said, "It was probably just a fish. A big one." I laughed. A bitter, broken sound. "Fish don't grab you." Her smile faltered. I leaned forward. "You know something's wrong here, don't you?" She paused. Then, softly, "This camp has been around a long time. Some stories linger. Some griefs never rest." She let me call my mom. Ms. Bellamy said something about panic attacks. Overexcitement. Hallucinations. I hung up. But I knew the truth. It wasn't in my head. It was in the lake. While I waited for my mom to arrive, I wondered. Camp was quieter now. Most of the girls were off at archery or crafts. I found myself walking a path I didn't remember ever seeing before. It was narrow, overgrown, forgotten. At the end stood cabin B. The door was boarded. A faded X painted across the front. It looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. But the lock was open. I pushed the door, and it creaked like a scream. Inside, dust floated in the air like dead skin. The bunks were broken. The mirror above the sink was shattered. And on the far wall, scratched deep into the wood. I didn't want to die. But they made me invisible. Then I saw it. In the corner. A bracelet. Beaded. Faded, but intact. It spelled, Lily. My fingers trembled as I picked it up. The cabin door slammed shut behind me. When my mom arrived, I didn't say much. I just got in the car and stared out the window as Camp Laurel Hollow disappeared behind us like a bad dream. Avery didn't say goodbye. Katie just watched me from the porch, arms folded, a knowing smile on her face. Weeks passed. I tried to forget. But sometimes, at night, I hear water lapping against my window, even though we don't live near any lake. Sometimes I dream of that bracelet still clutched in my hand, though I buried it in the woods the day I got back. And sometimes, I feel something wet grab my ankle in the shower. Just for a second. Just enough to remind me. The lake never forgets. And maybe Lily never left. Not really. Maybe she's just looking for someone to stay.